Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, you won't believe how cheap a botnet is, but then we'll play a game based on your Adobe password, and it's an uber batch of your questions and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 138 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on November 21st, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as this show goes on. Our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Dude, I know this is the second episode recording because you were lounging in that chair. You're laid back. You're in total relax mode now. Hour number 2 of the TechSNAP marathon. I'm good to go. Well, just because it's our second episode in a row doesn't mean it's a small show. No. In fact, friends, Big show today. Big show today. We've got a lot of good stuff, as always. It is kind of mandatory. We have some good stuff lined up, and we have something fun planned for the end of the year, which we're going to announce in this week's episode of the TechSNAP show, assuming we remember by the time we get to that point, which will be a while from now. It is in the show notes if I forget to mention it, so you can go find it there. Alan, before we get started, I guess now the time's already passed. Darn. Well,
what?
I was going to tease that we have an interview coming up on this Sunday's Linux Action Show, but by the time we get it
this airs, that'll be too late. Yeah. Should have done that last episode.
I should have. Could have. But
who's your interview anyway?
Time math fails me. Well, so you heard about it recently in the chat room. That's why I was going to bring it up. Because remember you said, I don't even know what Integros is? Remember? Yeah, the chat room's been talking about Integros a lot. It is a spin of Linux that is trying to accomplish a few things based on Arch Linux, and we're going to bring them on. And I want to solicit questions from the audience, but it's too late. It's already happened. Yeah. All right, well, I was just looking over...
So for this, I don't know who our guest will be on BSD Now for this week, which would have been yesterday when this comes out.
Yeah.
But... we have an interview every single week.
Yeah,
because we're awesome.
I know you guys have so much show in every episode of BSD Now. It's kind of ridiculous. Yep. What are you going to do? I mean, you can't do tutorials forever. Now, interviews that can last quite a while.
Yeah, our list of tutorials goes on and on and on.
You got to,
And then some of the ones we've done, it's like, well, take that existing one and here add this extra thing on top of it, right?
Well, and let's not even.
We haven't done mail server. We've done a tiny bit on a router, but then we had someone write in. It's like, well, in my situation, I have this box that has 4 NICs, and I want to use it like a regular router, where each of those 4 NICs is all on the same LAN. So actually using the router as a switch as well.
Well,
then it gets more complicated.
What I think is funny, as we record this episode of the TechSNAP program, TJ, the producer for BSD Now, already has documents created for the next 3 episodes of BSD Now, and they are already more current than the last show doc we did of TechSNAP. They've already been touched. He's just in there like a machine, constantly updating. So BSD Now it's already got content lined up for weeks, which I think is awesome.
Yep.
So, all right. Well,
and there's 10 half-finished tutorials, and
we've got a lot of content this week here in TechSNAP, and we talk a lot about the gray market for selling of vulnerabilities, or personal information of people or identities, but we've never actually really had a chance to put price tags on any of this stuff.
Yep.
And we've gotten 2 recent studies that kind of shed some light on this, right?
Yep. So darknetreading.com went in and they found that there's so much supply of stolen identities now that the prices are falling.
Oh, the inventory's too overflowing.
Too much inventory, yes. And so you can get the identity of someone. You can buy the identity of someone in order to steal their identity, take out credit cards in their name, do whatever, for as low as $25.
What?
For a U.S. citizen, and for a foreign person, it's usually about $40.
Oh my gosh!
Because there's fewer of them, so they cost a bit more. Depending on what you're going to do with it, I imagine the U.S. ones are more useful sometimes. But you can even go get more complicated. You get the credentials for a bank account that contains $70,000 to $150,000 can be bought for $300. Or fulls, which is this complete personal identity information. So rather than just the stuff you need to steal someone's identity, this is everything about them, including a list of all of their bank accounts and their like employment history and like everything about the person.
Foles, F-U-L-L-Z, Foles.
Z, but basically everything you need to know about even more than what you need to know about a person in order to steal their identity, like their entire history, for as cheap as $40 and $60 for overseas. And when Dell SecureWorks looked at 2011, the prices were 33% higher than they are now.
So the prices from 2011 have dropped 33%?
Yes.
Oh man, 33 to 37%, depending on where you check. It says.
Yeah, on the different sites and the different types of things.
Now you know me, Alan. I'm a Bitcoin advocate. I think digital currencies have a lot of interesting potential uses, but I also am a big believer that they enable this type of criminal activity to a much higher degree than cash.
This type of stuff went on long before Bitcoin.
But you could,
oftentimes using things like e-gold.
But you being a Canuck and me being a Yank, I can send you a Bitcoin, and a Bitcoin's a Bitcoin in Canada or the U.S. And I think just that plus tumbling services and the near anonymity you can get with Bitcoin, man, I think those are such enablers for this kind of activity that.
Well, they're enablers for all kinds of activity. It's not like it's specifically suited to this or anything.
Yeah, but I feel like it's better suited than previous monetary systems.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But with the tumbling and things like that. But in the end, you still have to cash out at some point.
Very true. Yeah.
Although, now that you can get, Bitcoin debit cards and stuff, it's a little easier.
Or if you're going to buy drugs on Silk Road 2.0, you don't ever really need to send it to cash. You can just convert it to drugs or whatever it would be, right? Or whatever good you want to convert it to. Maybe it's a Glide. Right. So there's an app out there now called Glide, and it's like gift cards for everything. And you can buy the gift cards with Bitcoin. And it kind of is like a little bit of a loophole. So you never have to actually have to convert it to cash because you convert it to a gift card. So it never leaves the e-currency status. And you could see how somebody could take revenues from this kind of stuff as like a side business. I mean, it doesn't have to be the main thing.
Well, this is the difference between when it's a side business and you're talking about small amounts of money where, a gift card and you can buy something with it or whatever.
Yeah.
Versus when it's a criminal enterprise and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, you don't want that in gift cards.
Right. Yeah, it's a different scale.
Although sometimes what you can do with that is get gift cards and then sell those at a discount and get a portion of the money as cash and another layer of
or sell them to some other middleman who would pay you cash for them or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so you can either sell them in bulk to somebody that runs a service like Glide and gives you gift cards in exchange for more Bitcoins than the gift card is worth. Or whatever, backwards and so on.
Mm-hmm. If it was me, I'd sit on it and let the price go up, and then cash it in.
Don't remind me.
I mean, I'm looking at this: $40 for a full ID on somebody, $60 if I want to steal somebody who's outside the U.S. Mm-hmm. These are when you get the prices this low,
$300 for a bank account with $75K in it.
That is a little scary. Don't you think?
The reason they're selling it so cheap is because it's kind of hard to manage to get all that money from that account into somewhere, right?
Ah, good point. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a high risk of getting caught when you steal $75,000 from a bank account because the bank really would like to have that money back.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
You remember there was that ring in New York, right? They were going out to all these different ATMs and cashing out all these, the account that way. And
they got busted.
Yeah. And also their leader got murdered.
Yeah, it's a hard knock life, Alan.
Yep. And that's why you can have an account with $75,000 in it and sell it for $300 because you'd rather have $300 than that headache. But if somebody has the infrastructure, like a gang or something, to try to cash that out, and people that'll take the fall instead of getting caught or whatever, then that $300 is worth it, right?
But I think the point that they underscore, and now this is in their best interest to underscore this point, but they say this report shows that cybercrime is becoming more and more commoditized, turnkey, and the bar to entry has become lower and lower as people develop kits to accomplish this kind of data theft and things like that.
Right. When there's malware kits, so anybody can write a slightly customized malware that steals X or Y, then they can collect all these things and sell them.
Well, and let's go ahead and just get it out of the way. Let's mention CryptoLocker, right? Okay, here's our CryptoLocker mention for this week's episode. It seems like when you have a success like CryptoLocker, or you had antivirus 2011, 2012, 2013, you have copycats, and they take the original. So somebody innovates, and they come up with a new way to extort money out of people by attacking their computer, and then you have all of the other guys who then take that and productize it almost. Like they take the idea.
Eventually, people become immune to it because they know of the scam, and then that one fizzles out, and there's the next innovation.
Yep, exactly. And in the meantime,
it honestly follows a typical business cycle.
It does. Isn't that the truth? I mean, it is. It is a business.
That's how a market works.
It's a business. It's a business.
Right? You being first to market has an advantage of you collect the biggest part of the upsweep, unless somebody can jump on it quickly enough to overtake you.
I feel like we could have come up with CryptoLocker. Like we know about all the technologies involved.
The most interesting thing about CryptoLocker was that all the crypto was done properly.
Yeah. But if we were doing it, we would have done it properly.
If somebody was making a commercial product to encrypt your whole hard drive, they wouldn't have done it as well.
I would have called, you know what I would have called mine? I would have called mine Trapper Keeper. Right? A callback, right? I made a callback, I would have called it Trapper Keeper, and all your data gets sucked up in the Trapper Keeper, and if you want it, you got to pay us Bitcoin. That's how I would have done it.
Anyway, the CTO of McAfee says that the pricing trends are interesting, but they can also be misleading because it really depends on where you buy it, right? The prices are all over the map.
Yeah.
Different underground sites will have it, different people will decide it's worth different amounts. And depending on the source, the details might be worth more, right? Depending how long the data has been exposed, right? Or whether people know that their identity was exposed.
Uh-huh.
Right? So if you got the stolen social insurance numbers or social security in the States, but people have been notified and have, or, the place that you breached has given free credit monitoring service to all their customers, those customers aren't worth as much anymore because it'll be harder to get away with stealing something.
Yeah. They're hip to it.
But if you have a hack where they don't know they've been breached and won't until all these reports that identities have been stolen come in, then those are worth more because they haven't been used yet. The identity of someone who's already had their identity stolen is not worth as much as someone who hasn't.
Right. Yeah, very true. Somebody who's unaware that it's happened isn't taking steps to prevent it from happening again or shut it down. Yep. Rather be sneaky.
So McAfee, in this June, did a cybercrime study and found that denial of service attack for higher services range from $2 to $3 per hour. Whereas the Dell SecureWorks study found that they're anywhere from $3 to $5 per hour, or $90 to $100 per day, or $400 to $600 per month.
Do these prices ring true to you, or do you think these are exaggerated downward?
It mostly comes down to who's selling it and the quality of the botnet, right? If you can just collect a bunch of bots and attack somebody, then,
Good point. I guess
anybody can execute a denial of service attack for $3 to $5 an hour because it doesn't cost them anything, except for a portion of the bots you use are going to get taken down because they'll get noticed because they're using a denial of service attack.
So I guess what you're really saying is we don't know, like, if they were going to Joe's market for some of these vulnerabilities, right? Like if you go to somewhere that's more sophisticated, they might be charging you more money.
Right. Well, basically it comes down to the quality of the product, right? Like is the denial of service attack you're launching a bunch of DSL lines, or is it a bunch of compromised servers?
Are you going after a business or a government agency, or are you just going after Joe user, right? That's probably a difference there too.
And it's like, do you need enough to knock one cable modem off the internet, or do you need enough to take down a whole data center?
Right. Yeah, because the cable modem, we'll give that to you for $5, $10 for an hour. But you want to attack.
But really, there's no cost other than the attacker's time in writing the malware and infecting the computers.
Well, and if you have
most of that's automated.
If you're like, okay, here, if I'm Mr. Businessman, right, and I'm making this my living, and I'm going to pay my mortgage off of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have malware that infects machines that are under my control, kind of on demand. So when you come to me as a client and you want to buy my services, I don't have to go invest in a bunch of hardware. I don't have to go own a bunch of machines. I've already got them. So my initial expense is already there. That's where my initial expense is.
Yeah, so the bot herders already have their herd of bots.
Yeah. And then you come to me and I just utilize that. So it's like the price is low because I've already established that.
Part of it is the cheaper ones often are coming from your classic script kiddies.
Yeah.
They go out, they spend a couple hundred, they do something to make a couple $100 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they spend that on buying one of these exploit kits. Then use that to make their malware that they then grow a botnet out of, and then they can rent it out. So they're not actually doing any of the malware writing themselves. They're like a franchisee, right? They're just buying the exploit, using it, and then selling the result.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing the prices drive down, because you don't have to. It's not only the people that can actually write malware that are renting out bots anymore. Anybody can buy an exploit kit, infect a bunch of machines, and then rent those machines out.
Well, what's funny? What it reminds me of is the professional side of things, where I buy a kit like the Nessus Enterprise Edition or whatever it is, right? And that kit gets updated, and I go break into systems and I audit them, and I'm not the guy creating the kit. I'm the guy just executing the toolkit that's been provided that I've paid for, and then I go and I make money off of that. And it's sort of the opposite side of that. They're buying a kit.
It's Merit. It's the same way that you buy, same way that as a guy that goes around and cleans up malware, you buy things like Malwarebytes Workbench Edition.
Yep.
And or Nessus or NetExpose or whatever. It's the same idea.
And it's funny because as the barrier to entry to be able to take advantage of the stuff goes down, and as the amount of people taking advantage of the stuff goes up, I look at it and I think, it really all just kind of comes back to the original fundamentals. If you take care of the fundamentals, you're kind of immune from some of these things. Now, it's not perfect. Yep. Like ID theft, right. That's a little more tricky.
Yeah, or when somebody comes up with a 0 day, then there's no defense against that.
What are you going to do? Yeah.
But a lot of times, this is just people doing it wrong.
Yeah, and then other people taking advantage of it, and then the people that can take advantage of it just scales upwards as the technology becomes more commoditized.
Yep.
Interesting. All right. Well, by the way, I saw a stat in here. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, that the bots you can buy, if you want to buy a bot network, 1,000 bots currently going for $20. And of course, if you want 15,000 bots, $250.
Yep. They also have the cost of having a website hacked runs between $100 and $300. Although obviously some websites just aren't vulnerable, so can't be hacked. With the more experienced black hat hackers charging more money for their services,
sure.
But they can get into the websites that the script kiddies can't. Right? Anybody can run an SQL injection fuzzer against a website, but black hat can do more. But in an interesting twist, some of the more experienced hackers stipulate that they won't attack government or military websites.
Hey, man, we don't get into that.
Well, helps not to get caught.
Hey, it's good for business.
There's also doxing service. We've talked a little bit about this before, but basically doxing is when the hacker community posts all the information they can find about a person, basically exposing a person, usually because they've done something. But, it's like, here's their phone number and their address, and, here's a list of their different handles they've used on IRC, and here's their Twitter handle and their Facebook, and from their Facebook we know that they used to work over here or whatever. It's just all the information they can get. Social media, social engineering, Trojan infection, all that, and then that ranges from $25 to $100 to dox a person.
JD Mully in the chat room is asking. He says, "I wonder if you could use a botnet as a cheap alternative to AWS for processing, say something like Bitcoin mining or hashing." Just as a flash follow-up, Alan, I probably should have put this in the roundup. I don't know why I didn't. Remember that gaming company we talked about where one of the engineers slipped Bitcoin mining into the gaming software?
Into the game updater?
Yeah. That gaming company was fined $1 million on November 19th for using players to mine Bitcoin. So, if you get caught, there's quite the penalty to be paid.
Yep.
Just kind of a little interesting update to that whole thing.
But when you do it with malware, it's a little harder to get caught.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but harder.
Yeah. Well, we should have come up with we should have come up with our own crypto logger. Should have called it Trapper Keeper. Could have made some Bitcoins. Just would have been a good idea, Alan. Here we go. Once again, missed another opportunity. All right. Well, any other thoughts on that one?
No.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, we have links to that in the show notes, including all of the prices for the different exploits, all broken out right there in the show notes. If you guys are curious, go check that out. Find out how much it's worth if you want to hire a botnet. It's all right there. But first, I want to thank one of our sponsors for this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. And, of course, it is a longtime sponsor, GoDaddy. Now, GoDaddy is sponsoring this episode of the TechSNAP program, and they want to tell you guys about their website builder. And I'm pretty excited about this because the website builder makes it easy to create your own website, put your business online, and find new customers. You can choose from hundreds of customizable designs, and then you're on your way. Website builder even includes a free domain, hosting, and 24/7 support. It's go time, so visit GoDaddy.com and enter the promo code WSB7. Website Builder 7. You see how WSB? Yeah, it's clever.
Mm-hmm.
Go over there. You get the GoDaddy Website Builder, which includes the domain, the hosting, and the support for $1 a month for 12 months. If you use the code WSB7 when you check out. Now, I want to underscore something here. That support, that's a big deal because I think this website builder is the perfect thing to recommend to somebody who desperately needs a website, needs to have a presence online, needs to own the keywords around their business or their brand or their identity or whatever it is. This is how you do it. This optimizes mobile, this optimizes SEO, and this is super easy click and drag kind of stuff, and it produces beautiful code on top of all of that.
But the biggest thing about using GoDaddy in their website builder is compared to something like Wix, where they control your domain and they control all the website and you're kind of limited. Or the worst one I've seen is like the Yellow Pages sells people on website and they charge them like thousands of dollars a year. And they own your domain name. If you ever decide you need more of a website, like a WordPress blog or something, you don't own the domain.
Yeah. No,
with GoDaddy, you own the domain.
Exactly.
It's yours.
It's componentized. You can break out the domain. You can break out the hosting, whatever you need. They've got a bunch of great services. You know, last week we talked about hosting your own email system. If you've got a small business, you could use this website builder to establish your website, get a presence online, and then you can roll in some of the really fantastic, like they have full-fledged exchange for your business that you can enable through GoDaddy. If you want a complete enterprise mail solution at prices that anybody from a small business to a large business can afford, or even an individual, GoDaddy has got that solved. And when you use that promo code WSB7, you're going to get started at $1 a month for 12 months. Create a website, own your name, own your brand, whatever it is you need to have a presence for, go get it. If you've got a resume, you're trying to get jobs, you want to do something, you want to get a client, a contract, you got a small business, this is something you need to take advantage of. So use the promo code WSB7 when you check out. And a big thanks to GoDaddy for their longtime support of the TechSNAP program. I think this is so brilliant because every holiday season, Alan, every holiday season, it's usually an aunt or an uncle. Last holiday, it was my Uncle Joe. He sat me down, and they all call me Christopher. Christopher, I'm a real estate agent now, and I need a website, right? Can you make it for me? I didn't really have a great answer. I didn't have a great answer. Website builder, now I got my answer this year, so I'm pretty excited. So thanks to GoDaddy.
Because a couple of years ago, I did one for my uncle, and it's like, well, I can't really make the website for you, but here's a template and throw some information in it.
Or like even when you can, like even when
then it just stays like that.
Yes, like, exactly.
They have so much better website, but I can't do it for him in this way. And I don't want to get a phone call every time you can't edit the HTML. 3
or 4 years ago, Angela's mom wanted to put her restaurant's menu up on the web. Right, which was
especially when it's just the hours and the address and a map.
And I was like, okay, well, how can I do this? Right, so I made an HTML page, linked the PDF, put the hours on there, embedded a Google map, and then of course 2 years later she comes to me and says, "Well, I'd like to be able to do this, this, and this now." I got nothing, right? Like I don't have time to do that.
I'm focused on doing my thing now.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with the website builder and the way they stack it all together, I think it's really a straightforward approach for folks that just need to get something online and they want to have it look good and they want to have it work on multiple devices. So, one story that we have been following on the TechSNAP show for a few weeks now is this whole Adobe breach. And the great thing about it is totally the gift that keeps on giving as far as news goes. Because first it's like, oh, not a big deal. Then it's this huge deal. And then, oh, by the way, this same server that we found the Adobe stuff on, we're also finding a bunch of other stuff. And the only way to really kind of abstract all of this and enjoy it is to make a game out of it, in my opinion.
Well, so because they encrypted the passwords instead of hashing them, and because they didn't have a salt, it means that every person who had the same password as someone else, the encrypted version is the same for each of those people.
Yep.
And it turns out the Adobe database also included their hints field, which wasn't encrypted. Well, no, that's fairly normal.
Well,
if people write good password hints. So this isn't a secret question and answer. This is a hint to remind you of what your password is. This is kind of antiquated. People don't really do this anymore, but Adobe did.
You're right.
And so, do you have the crossword actually on the screen?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So, the first question here is 6 across, and it shows the encrypted version of the password. And then instead of the clue that you'd normally get for a crossword is the list of the most popular password hints for this password, separated by the semicolon. So, number 6, and it says dog, cat, pet, dark, dog's name, dog, my dog, black dog, dog name, dog's name, darkness, black cat, Sonic, black kitty, horse, cat, pet's name, puppy, cat's name, old dog, shade, first dog, etc., etc., etc.
Awesome.
And it turns out that the password is shadow.
Oh, I can't quite fit TechSNAP into one of them. I wanted to.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is such a great idea.
Or the best one is one down. Hint is Adobe, Adobe X2, Adobe 2, Adobe twice, Adobe twice, Adobe 2X, site, name, software, company, 2X Adobe. The password is, in fact, Adobe.
Adobe. I'm going to do it right now.
Because I'm guessing they had a six character password minimum.
This is done really well. I think that's what's great about this is like, as I type, it moves into the next crossword box. Like it's
very well done bit of JavaScript.
Yes, exactly.
Sword Saint in the chat room asked, do you get the email address for the password when you hit it? These are the top 1,000 passwords that were reused. So the top passwords were used many, many times.
Yeah.
For example, the password Adobe 1 was used 56,744 times. Or the password Macromedia, 54,651 times.
I feel like there's a little insight into human behavior when you see this kind of stuff. Like
yes, but most of these lists, they cover the top 100 or whatever, and most of those are combinations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc.
Yeah.
But the game was actually pretty interesting to see what people put in hints as well and trying to figure it out. There's some interesting ones too. Like we've all seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Sure.
But the one, they did it on the number pad. So it was like 147258369. And it looks almost random, and then you realize that they just ran their finger up.
Yeah, I just did it. I just did it as you were saying it. That's exactly what it is.
So QWERTY's got 130,000 entries, but there's also AZERTY for the other keyboard layout, which is 48,000 entries.
Yeah.
Or people just use the letter A 6 times, 45,000 times. Other funny ones in here, the ones that you expect, like I love you, but also Sunshine was number 23 on the list.
Oh, that's nice.
Or Let Me In was 25. Monkey.
You know what? Let Me In. I see that. I have seen that so many times over the years.
Princess, Dragon, Daniel, Michael, Charlie.
Kids' names, yep.
What else do we got here? Jessica, Soccer.
What? I feel like here's a couple of basics.
Tigger, Thomas.
Don't use any combination of just key presses. Don't use your kids' names, and don't use your pet name, and don't use your favorite animal name. If your password's Toads, I'm going to figure it out. So, by the way,
so if you get rid of just numbers and repetitive, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and A, and ABC 1, 2, 3, and you get rid of Adobe and Macromedia, the name of the company, then the top ones left are password,
Go figure.
I love you, Sunshine, Monkey, Princess, Dragon, Master, Internet. That's a great password for the internet. Chocolate, Soccer, Tigger, Football, Dreamweaver, Baseball, and lots of names. Trust no and the number 1. It's like, don't trust that guy because he doesn't know how to make a password. But yeah, Andrea, Nicole, Hannah, Andrew,
Disney.
Joshua. Yeah.
Wow. So
Ginger, Matrix, Secret. Obviously, you expect Secret. Summer, Snoopy.
What is that? Let's see. Boy, you know what you brought back? Is it Loftcrack? Does that sound right to you?
Yes, Loftcrack is the one for
NTLM?
the LM hash.
Yeah,
no, the LM hash.
Yeah.
For Windows XP and previous. The other interesting thing is when you're looking at this link that has the top 100, it has columns with the encrypted version and the not encrypted version.
Yeah.
Because they were using DES, which uses an 8-byte block size, if the password is 7 bytes or less, then the hash is this long. If it's 8 bytes or more, then it's twice as long. But if it's exactly 8 bytes, the second half of the hash is identical because all it is the null byte. So, for example, the password internet, the second half of the hash, which starts with OX, capital G, 6, capital C, AT, H, B, W, equal, is identical for the passwords internet, Michelle, and football, and every other 8-character word. Because the first 8 bytes are the password, and the second 8 bytes of the hash, or not the hash, the encrypted version, is just the null byte to indicate the end of the string.
Padding. They're padding their bra.
Yeah, so it's the padding. Because, they're padding. So every password that's exactly 8 characters has exactly the same encryption ending. And so it was very easy to find all the 8-character ones and attack them with just an 8-letter word list.
Right.
Or to even just isolate every password that was less than 8 characters to do a brute force against. And like I said, because no salt means every person's password that was the same, you cracked them all at once. So all they had to do is try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they got 1.9 million accounts hacked. And then they tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, there's another 445,000. The word password, there's another 345,000, etc. But you should play the crossword. It's actually quite fun. Some of them aren't as easy to get. Other popular ones that we noticed in there were things like the brand name of the laptop or computer.
Sure.
So like if you're sitting at a computer, the name on your monitor is the word staring you in the face when you're trying to think of a password.
Right.
So the number of people with a password of Compaq, Toshiba,
ViewSonic.
Yeah. Logitech, because it was on their webcam or their mouse. There was one where it's the 401 to 500 one across. The hints are mouse, keyboard, log, computer, webcam, log eye, camera, speakers, mouse, cam, key, PC, the usual.
Yeah.
Company, standard, Logitech 1. And the password is, in fact, Logitech, which is the brand on the mouse, keyboard, or camera of most of these people.
Yep. Humans. That's all I have to say at this point. It's humans. I think it's good. This is a great way to sort of process it, is through this gamification of it, through the crossword puzzle, as it were, because it's. I mean, it
was fun. We were on Mumble, and there was a bunch of us trying to solve it together. Part of the problem was some of them were so easy we would get ahead of each other.
Really? That's well, I guess that's not too surprising. Well, if you want to play the Adobe crossword, Alan's got it linked in.
Well, the worst part is the guy who made this crossword didn't have access to the fully cracked list. So he says he only used the 1,000 most common passwords. Of those, he guessed 65% of them, spending less than 10 seconds on each one, just by looking at the hints and guessing.
Oh, man.
The remaining ones were mostly people's names or non-English words.
My password is in this crossword. He says the current best practice for passwords to generate is a unique random password for every login and password management service, such as KeePass, RoboForm, or LastPass.
Yep.
What do we always say?
And like we've seen with so many really cool projects, where did I get this idea? From XKCD. Because a couple of weeks ago, XKCD said hackers recently leaked 153 million Adobe user emails, encrypted passwords, and password hints. Adobe encrypted the passwords improperly, misusing block mode triple des. The result is something wonderful, and it shows kind of this starting to build this crossword thing. And then the greatest crossword puzzle in the history of the world. And so that guy built the crossword puzzle, and he did a very good job.
That is too. Look at XKCD.
I would say if you wanted to build something cool in JavaScript like this, I would hire this guy, because that crossword is really well done.
It is really well done. Yeah, it absolutely is really well done. You guys should go check it out. All right. Well, any other thoughts on that one, Al?
Let me just check my notes here. Crossword puzzles. The clues are the password hints, and if they had used Assault, then the 2 million people that all had the same password would have each had a different hash.
Uh-huh.
But they were using triple-des in block mode,
right,
and no hashes. It was horrible.
If only...
Like, even the really old, bad triple-des password hashing algorithm used a 2-character salt. So at least a fraction... It would have divided the 2 million people that had the same password into, like... What is that? It would be 4,000 different buckets. So there would have been 4,000 unique hashes to represent those 2 million people. So there still would have been a lot of repeating, but it would have taken 4,000 times as much work to crack that password.
You know why I sigh? Is because the larger companies really should know better. They should have people on their teams. I mean,
well, and apparently the worst part is that apparently Adobe knew better. They had switched.
Yeah.
But they didn't delete the old stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, boy, that data management aspect of all this can be pretty difficult too. I mean, how many times have we talked about companies that just had open...
I guess the biggest one here was that Adobe's like, oh, well, out of that 153 million, only 38 million were active. And those are the people we reset the passwords for. It's like, so because I'm not actively paying or using Adobe, they don't feel it's important to contact me even though they leaked my information.
Right.
They decide because you're not an active user, they shouldn't have to do anything for you.
Well, how do they define active?
Like, I don't... It was based on, like, I think if you paid the money or if you have used the account recently.
So if I haven't signed into... I have an Adobe account.
Just because I haven't used it in a long time, they don't feel it's important to tell me that they leaked my information.
And I haven't used it because their shit sucks. That's why I haven't used it. If it didn't suck, I had logged in and I'd have been using it, right? And so...
Well, also... I've noticed ever since this effort, they like decided my account was active or something. And I've started getting a lot more marketing email from them. It's like, hey, no, I do not want to buy an Adobe product.
Don't you want to sign up for the Adobe Cloud, Alan?
I only signed up way back in the day for the beta of Apollo, which later became Adobe Air.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to build a cross-platform desktop app for watching a video stream.
Dude, I signed up because I wanted to download a demo of Adobe Audition years ago.
So the thing I was trying to build actually was for viewing the live stream and the chat room on the screen side by side.
Okay,
but as a desktop app instead of a website, and it would be for Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Which would be very awesome, actually. And a great use of Air if they hadn't screwed Air over. I mean, that would have been a great use of Air, really.
And because all it was an HTML page and the Flash player. It was...
So can I get meta on you for a second? Like, are you going to stop using Adobe products over this?
Which Adobe products am I using?
Well, I guess that's the thing. Like, for me, Audition sometimes comes into play.
We use Flash Player.
What about Photoshop?
That's our whole business. But no, we don't own a copy of Photoshop. We pay somebody else to do our Photoshopping for us.
Yeah. But I guess what my point is, like, if Scale Engine needed to do some in-house graphics and you needed Photoshop, I still feel like you'd buy it, though, right?
We don't have an in-house person. We farm that out just because we could probably pay some artists less money than a Photoshop license.
So you're being all practical. My point is, though, I don't feel like this is going to stop anybody from buying Adobe.
But, when we need to make a PDF, we don't go buy Acrobat Writer. We use OpenOffice.
But the reality is, but the practical matter in the market is I bet you this doesn't even cost them a single sale, or maybe if it does, it's a dozen.
It's not many.
Yeah.
It definitely puts a damper, I think, on their cloud version of Adobe Photoshop, though.
Yeah, it makes people definitely think twice.
You don't get to own this. We're going to only have it available online. And, if somebody hacks us again, we'll probably turn it off for a couple of weeks while we fix it.
And in my case...
And then you won't your business that relies on your business of you Photoshopping stuff for people won't work for those couple of weeks. You'll just be out of business.
Yeah, in my case, I'm just going to avoid that now. Like, I will do everything possible to avoid being pulled into that system because of these problems. Because I can't trust what they're doing, right? I can't trust how they're storing my information, and I can't trust what's going to happen if there's a breach that occurs. And what I would like to see, and I know this is like pie in the sky, but I would like to see all of these vendors come to me and say, congratulations, thank you for signing up with the Adobe Cloud. Here is how we'll be managing your data. And I would like them all to assume a breach will happen.
I need it before I sign up.
Yeah, right. Let me know how you're going to store my data before I sign up. Exactly. That's a good point. You need to have it beforehand. And like, I would like to see like some sort of, I don't know how they could say it in a way that's not like scary for marketing terms, but I would like to have them say, we have planned for a breach to happen because odds are we're a big target and it's going to happen. And when that breach happens, well, we have hashed your passwords, we've applied assault, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like, I would just like to see it all outlined. And I don't really think like that's asking very much, because you could actually spin it into like a marketing thing, like Adobe cares about your privacy and we have assaulted your passwords. Like, they could make a whole marketing thing out of it.
Yes, like at scale, your password is decrypted, but we store your credit card using asymmetric encryption. So our servers all have the public key to be able to encrypt your credit card, and they store it in the database. But when we go to bill it, we have to decrypt those cards with a different key, and that key is completely air-gapped. It only exists on a couple of USB sticks that are stored somewhere safe when we're not using them. And then when it's time to bill credit cards, you hook it up, decrypt the cards, you bill them, and then you put the key back away. And so in the middle of the month, except for during that billing cycle, there's no way for anyone to access that key in order to decrypt your credit card.
That's smart. Like
it's a hassle, right? We can't just have everything be completely automated and the server can decrypt your credit card and bill it whenever it needs. But it's practical for us. It's a trade-off we're willing to make in order to not be the guys that leak your credit card.
Yeah, no kidding. You don't want to be those guys.
No.
Yeah. Especially since you cater to a more technically savvy audience in some regards. Like, that's a bullet point for me, that if you made a box product, I'd love to see that on the box, right? Because that's something I'm looking for. All right, well, any other thoughts on this story?
Nope, that's about it.
Okay, well, while we're talking about getting practical, I want to talk about Ting.com, because Ting is about as practical as it gets, my friends. Ting.com is mobile that makes sense, my mobile service provider. No contracts, no early termination fees. That's just how you get started. Once you get into Ting, you're going to be so happy. You only pay for what you use. Each line, flat $6 per month. Then you pay for your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes. Ting adds them all up at the end of the month. Whatever bucket you fall into, that's what you pay. You don't pay into some huge contract you don't use all of the time. And when you don't use all the time, you're losing money. Rollover minutes is a gimmick. Don't buy into that. That's them fooling you. You need to go over to Ting. Let's make a difference together in the industry by working with a company that's shaking it all up. You own the phone. You own the device, and you're in control of the plan at all times. If you need 300 minutes one month and 700 minutes the next month, Ting has got you covered. It's only $6 per month, and you pay for what you use. Plus, they have excellent customer service. You call them at 1-855-TING-FTW, and a real person answers the phone. Caller ID, voicemail, picture messaging, hotspot, tethering, all included with the Ting flat rate. Plus, the minute buckets, super easy to understand, totally convenient. And for myself, I'm definitely more of a data user, but as the holidays approach, like the phone minutes, they just tick up, my friends. They tick up, they tick up, tick up. And I'm definitely in the territory right now. Right now, I'm in the territory where if I was in a prefixed plan, I'd be violating that plan because I would have bought a cheaper plan because I don't use a lot of voice. But as soon as about November hits, man, I go outside that box that the telcos try to put me in. And on top of that, I like owning my devices. I don't know about you, Alan, but when I buy a computer, I like to have administrative access to that computer. That's kind of my personal feeling. And when it comes to smartphones, I want to own that smartphone. I don't want to be renting that smartphone. I don't want to have to worry about contracts.
The renting is always a bad deal. Like, they lock you in on a contract for years, and that contract, you end up paying like 4 times the amount for the phone. So I've always been lucky enough to be in the situation where I could just buy the phone outright and then get a much, much cheaper plan.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, as somebody who's had to deal with a lot of different interfaces and a lot of different ways to manage accounts, Ting's the one that solved it. Their dashboard is so straightforward, so easy to use, yet extremely powerful. Set up what happens when somebody calls you and you don't answer. Set up if you want somebody to see your caller ID. Set up alerts for how many megabytes you've used. transfer a device, deactivate a device, activate a device. You can do all of it through the Ting website, or you call them at 1-855-TING-FTW, and they'll take care of it for you. The excellent online support as well. If you're more of a technical person, which you might be if you're watching the TechSNAP show, and you want to make something work, Ting has awesome forms. And here's a great example of why I'm so happy to have Ting advertise on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, is when the Nexus 5 rolled out, like day 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 of the Nexus 5, Ting didn't have official support for it yet, but there was a forum thread that started where really enthusiastic Ting customers were working to make the Nexus 5 function on the Ting network. And instead of Ting like stomping that down like VZW does with the Nexus 7, like instead of Ting like putting a stop to that, Ting reached out to those people in the community and said, let's work together. Let me see what results you're getting. Here's the results we're getting. Let's work out an awesome solution for the Nexus 5 on the Ting network with our community, with the entrepreneurs in our community who are trying to figure this stuff out. Let's utilize that talent because it's exactly the kind of people we have working at Ting. Let's work with them and make the Nexus 5 work on Ting, and that's exactly what's happened now. You can buy the Nexus from the Play Store, and you can activate it on the Ting network because Ting has interacted directly with their community to make that happen. Originally, and this is just my supposition here, Ting's plan was to sell the device directly from Ting in the Ting store. And they can't even get, probably, I don't know, the same price you could get from the Play Store because there's a markup that happens when you don't buy it from the Play Store. So Ting did a complete about-face truly based on the demands of their educated Ting customer base. That's incredible. That is incredible. You don't see other mobile companies doing that. So go over to techsnap.ting.com.
One of the things that makes the big difference here is Ting is not a new company. Like, the Ting brand is new, but the company behind it, 2 Cows, has been around since the beginning of the internet.
And
they ran the original 2 Cows, which is the ultimate collections of WinSock applications.
That's right.
Right? This is back when people had to run WinSocks on Windows 3.1 to access the internet.
Yep.
These guys understand community, internet, that there are experts out there who just want their stuff to work and want to share that information with other people.
Yeah, it's all about the lineage, because the lineage of 2 Cows is about going in there, disrupting, recognizing what the other guys are not doing right, and then making that course correction, and then owning the market based on that course correction, because that's what the demand is for. How do you not love that? So look, go get started. Go to techsnap.ting.com. That's going to take $25 off your first month of service if you bring a Ting-compatible device. They got all of that listed on their website. If you don't already have a Ting device, no probs. They'll take $25 off your first device when you visit techsnap.ting.com. And oh, by the way, if you're locked into a contract with your current oppressive mobile provider, don't worry about it. Go to ting.com/ETF. They've got an early termination relief program where they'll take up to 75 bones per device that you've got to cancel with your current oppressive telco. They'll give you that $75. All you got to do is go grab your Ting device, port your number, activate it, and then submit your ETF claim, and Ting will take care of you. So go to techsnap.ting to get started, and thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. I have my HTC One with me at all times, and today that we're recording is my wife's 30th birthday, and my dad and I have been planning like some sort of invasion. Like, we've been coordinating every few minutes at certain points over the phone. All right, I got her this, but now you need to get her this that goes with this. Okay, all right, I got her this, but now you need to get her this. I mean, the holidays, dude, the minutes stack up. It really does. All right, Alan. Well, is there anything else we wanted to cover in the news segment for this week's episode of TechSNAP?
Nope, that's it.
All right, well, very good. Then that does bring us to this week's episode of the feedback. Yeah, the feedback, that's right. Every episode in the TechSNAP program, we answer your questions in the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first email this week, or actually TechSNAP subreddit thread, comes in from Particle Spin Class, which is a good one. It says, Chris, Alan, and JB community. Firstly, I had written in about being unhappy at my job a few weeks ago, and I'd like to follow up. As you know, I got a new job at a medium to large hosting company. I'm on my 3rd day here, and so far, it's been great. It's a whole lot to learn, as they have a very complex system, but I think it's going well. In my training stage, so I'm working day shifts, but once I graduate, I'll probably be shifting to nights, which I prefer. I agree. At a hosting company, I'd prefer nights too. I think that's the sweet spot. He says, in my training stage, there's definitely a big learning curve, however. Coming from a small shop with a few dozen servers, the new place has hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, probably more like 1,000 servers, and they manage quite a few large companies with hundreds of servers just for one of those clients, as well as some smaller ones. And I just wanted to say thank you for your help on my first email. So, I have a new question for you guys. I'm going to be setting up a pfSense box, and I'd like to do double duty as a file server as well. I'm planning on Plex for media streaming and probably OwnCloud and BitTorrent Sync as well. It's a single machine, and it's not very powerful. I figure it'd be good enough for basic router duties and some basic file serving. It's got 1 GB of RAM, 2 SATA ports. I can put a 1 TB hard drive on there, and I also have a few 300 to 500 GB drives. I'm going to be using a built-in 100 megabit NIC for the WAN port and pick up 2 gigabit NICs for the LAN side and team them together. So theoretically, I'd be able to pull 2 gigabits from my main PC. I'm not sure the drives could keep up, so it's not likely, and it's not really like it would matter. So he links us even. He even links us to the specs he's thinking about buying. He says, my main question is, should I have the main machine be a pfSense box and run FreeNAS virtualized, or vice versa? How should I set this up? So you got a pfSense, you got FreeNAS.
That's not very much RAM at all.
No.
And did he say it only has 2 SATA ports? How's he going to connect drives?
1 gig of RAM and 2 SATA ports.
But then he mentions having more than 2 hard drives.
Yeah, he says he's got a 1 terabyte drive, and he's also got a few 320 to 500 gig drives. You know, so he maybe could hook up one of those.
Got 2 SATA ports. How is he going to connect any of that? I would not recommend making a NAS that doesn't have redundancy.
Yeah. What's the point?
For sure.
What's the point?
It's just going to lose your files.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the NAS's fault. It's going to be the hard drive's fault.
Yeah.
And mostly it's going to be your fault.
Yeah, because you're going to put them on that NAS, and then you're going to set it and forget it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's going to die.
And then the drive's going to die, and then all your files are gone, and then you're going to be upset.
That's what exactly will happen.
So, yeah, honestly, I would want 4 gigs of RAM to use ZFS, although with something so small, you could avoid using ZFS, but FreeNAS is starting to move away from not using ZFS because why would you want to not use ZFS? But really, like, he's talking about buying hardware, but how's he going to buy hardware that crappy? I don't know where you would buy it.
Yeah. I think this has got to be stuff he's inheriting, essentially.
Okay, well, and the teaming 2 NICs together doesn't quite work like that. The way LACP and stuff like that works, it's hashing the source and destination to decide which NIC to send it over. So you're not going to get the speed of both NICs between point A and point B. It only helps if you have more than one client pulling out of the FreeNAS. And then, it can send all the data for one client over one NIC and another client over the other NIC.
Oh, okay.
You can make a FreeBSD lag use all the NICs, but it won't work how you think it will.
Gotcha. That's good to know. Yeah, especially anytime you're connecting to a box that has 1 or 2 hard drives and a gigabyte of RAM, you really don't need to worry about binding your NICs together. That's like the least of your problems.
Because, the hard drive's not going to be able to top the 125 megabits that you're going to get out of the gigabit.
Yeah.
So, I would recommend at minimum mirrored drives, and if you only have 2 ports, that's your only option. Otherwise, you'd be looking at least a RAID Z1 or 2. You could do ZFS with only 2 gigs of RAM, although I wouldn't, but you can.
Well, and he's talking about Plex, and Plex is super heavy on the CPU.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily shy with memory.
And then adding BitTorrent Sync on top of that and OwnCloud.
And BitTorrent Sync, if you have a lot of files in there, which I've discovered later on, when you share something on a BitTorrent Sync, it generates a torrent for each file. And if you think about the math required when you have... We were just talking on the pre-show. My wife has nearly a 500 gigabyte photo library. And I thought I'd had the ingenious idea to back up that whole damn thing with BitTorrent Sync, because then it just, every time she adds a file, it just syncs it to the server, right? I didn't realize that BitTorrent Sync generated a torrent for every single file. She has, I think it's like a quadrillion files in there. I mean, hell, it's a mess. And it just slammed the server because all BitTorrent Sync could do the entire time was constantly check the index and run a hash on every single file. And by the time it got to the bottom, it was way overdue to start again. And it would start from the top and work its way through every single file.
Ouch.
Yeah, so you got to have, if you have a slow CPU, it'll eat up the whole CPU doing that.
Yep. So in general, I would recommend having the FreeNAS be the real hardware because it needs access to the real disk controllers. Virtualizing your NAS is never, ever, ever, ever a good idea.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing pass-through on the hardware, it's still better if you run it on the real hardware.
Well, and
the pfSense, not so much. You know, if your internet connection is not that fast, only 100 megabits or whatever, then virtualizing the pfSense won't hurt anything.
But if you have
the
VMs
issue is
running
that there's not really a way to virtualize. That's the other thing I didn't consider. You're talking about doing virtualization with only 1 gigabyte of memory.
Yeah. It means you got 2 NICs.
How are you going to run VirtualBox? How?
And again, we come into the not enough hard drive scenario too, because you got your OS, you got your virtualized machines. It's
yeah, and both FreeNAS and pfSense are appliances, so they have all the core OS stuff stripped out, and it's just down to what you need, so that it'll fit on a tiny USB stick, so that you don't need any hard drives. Or in the FreeNAS case, where you can have the data drives be pure data drives with none of the OS stuff on it. So that you can, move the drives to another machine without causing problems and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, with virtualization, 1 gig of RAM is not going to be enough either. And you're going to have to divide that up and stuff. Currently, there's no way to run pfSense on top of FreeNAS.
No.
Or vice versa.
I wouldn't.
Or vice versa.
I wouldn't even.
When FreeNAS gets to 10 and maybe has a Beehive plugin, then you'll be able to run the pfSense as a in Beehive on it.
That could be badass.
Bridge the networking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, right now you can run FreeNAS and pfSense in Beehive.
Yeah.
Although those are only, specifically FreeNAS, that's what the developers use for testing changes to the web UI. It's not meant for actually storing files.
Oh, okay.
You should never virtualize FreeNAS or any NAS, right? NAS is talk to hardware. And when you virtualize that, all of a sudden the hardware doesn't actually know what's going, or the NAS doesn't actually know what's happening on the hardware. And then that's how data gets lost.
Well, and you end up in this loop where the virtual machines are dependent on another virtual machine. And if for some reason the virtualization environment can't initialize properly, you have this cascade of failure that happens.
Yeah.
And he's in a tough spot because he's working with some really limited hardware resources.
Yep.
I totally get where he's coming from, but at the same time, I think he's trying to pull off too much on one box.
Yeah, that's not enough hardware to run FreeNAS.
I think you got to pull. Yeah. Exactly.
The pfSense, that box could run the pfSense, but it'd be overkill for pfSense.
Yep.
But it's not enough to run FreeNAS.
And let alone BitTorrent, Sync, or Plex.
Mostly, you want more hard drive connectors.
Yeah, right? And more memory. 1 gig really is like
yeah.
You want to run an Nginx or Apache server on that machine. Have that.
Well, you're going to have to run one of those to run OwnCloud, right? And then you're going to have to run PHP on top of that.
Yeah.
Plus, PEX is heavy, like you said, and BitTorrent Sync is heavy.
Yeah. So don't virtualize FreeNAS. If you got to virtualize one, virtualize pfSense.
Yep. And I've done that before, and it works fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Particle Spring class, let us know.
But yeah, you definitely want to have redundancy in your NAS. And the biggest problem there is you don't have enough SATA ports.
See, and like irrational.
So instead of putting a 2 gigabit NIC in it, you can get a SATA controller card for $5 off eBay. I don't recommend the $5 one, but you can get the $5 one. And then that way you can plug in enough hard drives that you could have redundancy.
That would give you better performance than 2 NICs.
And so if you plug in those mix of 320s and 500s and drives,
if you got
and create as a RAID Z, it will use whatever drive is the smallest. They'll use that much space on each of the drives. So you won't use the whole 1 terabyte drive.
Right.
But if later you use the Zpool replace command to replace that very smallest drive with a new 1 terabyte drive that you can buy a couple months from now or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, ZFS will snap the whole pool to being the size of the new smallest drive on each drive. So if you have like a 320, a 500, and a 1 terabyte, it'll use 320 on each. Then when you replace the 320 with another 1 terabyte, now it'll use 500 gigs on each. And then if you later replace the 500 gig one with a 2 terabyte drive, then it'll snap to using 1 terabyte on each drive. And as you slowly rotate, it'll grow. It just won't use all of the space on all the drives because you wouldn't have redundancy in that case.
So, Alan, we do this show live, and Vlad's watching live over at jblive.tv, and he says, router and storage on the same machine makes me cry. Also echoed by a rational number in the TechSNAP subreddit saying he would not mix.
Mine was done that way for a long time, but it's because mine was a raw FreeBSD box, and I just configured the router and the file server the same way.
I feel like
there was no virtualization. But I've virtualized my router before, and it works fine.
I know, and we've talked about this before on the show. Like, it's not like a new topic, but I honestly feel like...
It can also depend on your performance requirements. If your router is only... If you only have a 15 megabit internet connection, 15 megabits down and a quarter of a megabit up or something, then, yeah, some tiny little box is going to be able to handle that.
Yeah.
Now, I have 100 down and 5 up, and so I need a beefier machine. But also, my part was I wanted to start playing with FreeNAS on top of my ZFS storage box, which is plain FreeBSD, not FreeNAS. And so I wanted to play with Beehive on top of FreeBSD, but I didn't want to reboot my router.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved the router to a separate machine.
Mm-hmm. Interesting discussion. That whole debate about your most sensitive files being also on your most edge device, I think that's a valid conversation to continue to have.
That can be, yes.
Yeah. I mean, like, when I worked in IT, like, they would come to me and say, can you absolutely guarantee that nothing could ever hop from the virtual environment to another environment? Can you guarantee me that? And it's like, how can I really guarantee that, right? So I'd have to waffle and be like, well, technologically, it shouldn't happen, and it should be safe, but I suppose there could be some sort of processor-level vulnerability that maybe they could use to hop between.
We've talked about a couple of those.
Right.
It wouldn't really hop between them, but to steal information from one of the other ones.
So, like, whenever you start to go down that path in the conversation, like, you've lost ground, right? So,
but yeah, so in the future, FreeNAS will likely grow the ability to run pfSense in Beehive on top of itself.
That's pretty cool.
But that'll be probably a year away. Maybe not quite that long. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends how much demand there is for that. If there's a lot of demand, I guess FreeNAS might move towards it a little sooner.
Dude, according to our inbox, there's demand.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Jacob writes in. He wants to talk about backing that S up. He says, I've been tasked in my office with backing up all of our computers. We are a Linux shop, which with about 10 laptops with about 500 gigabytes of storage on each, and a couple of boxes with about 4 terabytes altogether. I'm thinking of doing a FreeNAS solution with ZFS. One thought I had was that we all might have a high overlap of files on our computers, seeing as we all check out the same Git repos and probably have a couple of large files that we all have same across all the computers. Is there a case where deduplication might be effective? Is this it? What might be a good solution to fire up a backup nightly on each computer? We'd probably want some parity so that we have drives which might be looking at. The data is not super important, so maybe 2 drives that could be lost at once, and that's doable. Any pro tips? P.S. Ever thought about having all the shows? Oh, this is to me about having a supporter system for all the shows. He says, thanks for the great shows and keep it up, Jacob. So he's worried about deduplication. He's worried about backing up. What does he say? 10 laptops to a central storage.
Yeah. So he needs, but it sounds about around 5 terabytes of storage.
Yeah.
With a minimum ZFS RAID Z2. So yeah, you can use RAID Z2 or 3 to get 2 or 3 drives failing at once without it taken out. You could do dedupe, but you need a lot of RAM to do that.
Yeah.
So it also depends how you want to do some of it. You can do something like rsync to folders on the FreeNAS. One way to look at it might be doing something like Bacula. So in ZFS, the dedupe is block level. It looks at each block on the file system and decides if it's the same as some other one. When you use Bacula, its dedupe feature is file level. So it looks at the SHA-256 hash of a file and sees if that's already in its MySQL index. And if it is, then it doesn't back it up because it knows it already has it. It just makes a reference. And Bacula can do smarter stuff like looking at you can exclude certain directories more easily, and it's all the configuration would happen once on your Bacula director, and then it connects out to all the machines and backs the stuff up. So that's one option. The other one is using rsync and push it all to the FreeNAS.
What is Bacula's like a duplication solution where you have a bunch of files?
It's file level. So it looks, as part of the backup, it takes the hash of every file, either the MD5 or the SSH256 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when it sees two that are the same, it can skip backing it up and just make the reference to the file it's already got backed up.
That would do it perfectly.
Yep. Or, if you just use ZFS and you enable the LZ4 compression, then all those text files in Git are going to compress down so small that it's not going to matter that you're storing it multiple times.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the best solution because it doesn't require any extra RAM. Whereas dedupe, you have to have a lot of RAM. Otherwise, you might get in the situation where you can't import that ZFS pool because it needs more RAM than you have, and it'll just crash. So that's why people recommend against dedupe, because if you do it wrong, it's really, really bad.
Well, if we're going to mention Bacula, I feel like I should mention Backup PC, a high-performance enterprise-grade system that backs up Windows, Linux, and Macs, and its bread and butter is handling multiple files. When I worked at the bank that I like to mention from time to time, we had this huge problem where every freaking user had downloaded templates off the internet and stored them in their My Documents directory, and they were all the same, right? Like bit for bit, all the same. So what Backup PC could do is it would very intelligently scan the network as it was backing them up, and when it saw a file that had the same hash as another file, it would use hard symbolic links on the file system to link it together, but only use one copy. And I had incredible savings in terms of overall storage usage of the backup system. And what makes this crazy easy is Backup PC is perfect if you need file level restore, one Word doc, 3 iterations ago.
Right.
User calls you up, hey, Chris, you know what? I realized that last night when I was leaving the office, I saved the spreadsheet, and that was the last good copy. And I've been working on it all day, and I've messed it up. Can you restore last night at 3 o'clock? That's what Backup PC does. And let you just go in there and do that.
Backup is the same way, right? It's like, oh, I need this file. Okay, here's the list of dates that I have a backup of this file from.
Yeah.
And I can pick that. And all that's coming out of the SQL index.
Yep.
And then it can say, okay, that's stored on tape X or CD Y or on this hard drive.
Disk, yeah.
And you can store it.
Yep. Bacula is...
And Bacula is really nice because there's the client for Windows, Mac, Linux, and BSD, and Solaris.
Yep. Yeah. So there you go. A couple of options.
Backup PC is pretty cross-platform too.
So I guess your main answer would really be don't use dedupe at the file system level, but let the backup program handle the dedupe.
Yeah, just because unless you have gobs of RAM, dedupe can run you into trouble.
Yeah.
But ZFS with compression works great. Bacula can do compression, and the advantage with the Bacula one is the compression's done on the client. So the laptop that you're backing up would compress the files before it sends them over the network, which can be handy.
Yeah, especially when you're in a lot of machines at once.
Yeah.
Let the client handle that.
But
CPU
sometimes, you don't want to do that for whatever reason, right? Like if you're taking the backup during the day when somebody's trying to use the computer, you don't want to have all the extra CPU usage. So you back it up over you have enough network bandwidth that you can back it up uncompressed and then have ZFS compress it as it's writing it.
And that's where LZ4 could play. If you want to handle at the file server level, like Alan said, if it's mostly text files, you're fine.
Yeah.
All right. Mohan writes in and says, hi, Chris and Ellen. I have a home server running Fedora with a few services like OwnCloud, Nginx, and Nagios. I recently moved to a new apartment where the internet is provided and controlled by the landlord, and he's not ready to do port forwarding for my server. So what are my options to reach the services on my server from the outside? He says, I got a friend. He's in a different place, and I can utilize his home server, but I don't want to install any services on his server as I don't want to waste his bandwidth as well as I want to have full control of the server. Is there anything like Stun for servers that I can install on my friend's server and install Stun Client on my server to initiate the connection using a friend's server and then fall back to my server for the rest of the session? Or any other workaround you guys can think of? Thanks. Tough one.
Yeah. I don't think Stun would work. It might. I don't know that much about it. The way that my friend did it when he needed to do something like that was he used the LogMeIn VPN from Hamachi.
Hamachi. This is how I've done it too.
But in that case, you have to have the client on wherever you're trying to access that server from. So it doesn't work if you're trying to do a public website.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's only for you.
Yeah. And then SSH tunneling works, except for it uses up the bandwidth at the endpoint of the SSH tunnel, which is what he didn't want to do. right? He didn't want to use up the bandwidth on his friend's connection for everything coming into his house.
Yeah, I mean, if his ISP is blocking all incoming ports, he's really in a tough spot here. It's got to be something that initiates an outbound connection. Hamachi solves that. And you can load it on the laptop, Windows, Linux, or Mac.
The other option would be an SSH tunnel to a VPS that he bought.
Yeah.
And then you could... But usually those only have one IP, and it's like, well, I could just run the server directly in the VPS instead. Although, if that's not the problem, then yes, then you could buy a VPS for $5 or whatever, and SSH tunnel out from your house to the server, and then set up the forwarding there. So that those ports would go through the SSH tunnel.
I feel like he just needs to buy his buddy a few beers and be like, hey man, I'm going to use up a few megabytes extra of bandwidth this month, so here's a couple of beers to cover the cost. I mean, I don't feel like it's that big of a deal.
Well, it depends what he's trying to run on the server, though.
Well, that's true. Yeah. If he's trying to stream media files or something like that, right? I guess, so here's the other option. Take Alan's idea, put up a VPS, have your server do a VPN to that VPS.
Yep,
so
like
that way,
OpenVPN or something. Yep.
Right? So that way they're talking to each other.
Routing, or the port forwarding stuff on the VPS.
Yep.
And then when you connect to that port on the VPS, it actually connects over the VPN back to your house.
But I mean, straight up, Hamachi is... So
Hamachi is great if you want to access it...
Just for yourself.
From work or something.
Just for yourself. It's just for you. Or you and 3 or 4 or 5 other people, right? That could... If you
right, because with Hamachi, you can create a network and then only people you invite can join.
Right. Pretty nice. If that is outside what you need, you're kind of screwed. You go get a $5 VPS or go get a GoDaddy server and just use that.
Or you're going to have to bribe the guy that runs the apartment building's network.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. All right, Alan, well, that's all the emails we got for this week because we're doing 2 shows back-to-back, so we just went through our inbox. You know what that means? That means we need your email. So email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Even better, pop the contact link, or if you really want a gold star, submit a thread to our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, and that's where the community can talk about it. They can vote it up and down. They can give you their perspectives. So not only will you get answers faster than we can get them to you here in the show, but you'll also get the reflections of other members in our community who are also quite savvy. So I really liked that. So links.techsnap.tv. But Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show. We still want to give you some links to check out after the show. A lot of these links come from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Mr. Jude, our first submission is actually from us because we forgot to mention it last segment. We want your stories from 2013 that went big or went bust because we're going to do an end-of-year special around, what did we decide, the 18th of December?
It'll be recorded on the 18th, but it's the episode that will be the last one for the year.
Yeah.
It'll release on the 26th.
The day after Christmas.
The last Thursday of the year.
Yep. So we thought it'd be fun to do an episode. We're going to look back at a lot of the stories. And I mean, Alan and I have a few favorites that we want to reflect back on. But really, we would love to hear what you guys thought was like a big story that either, number one, didn't go very big, like maybe we talked about it and then just totally fizzled out. Or number two, we talked about it and it totally needs to be revisited again to give it a little more analysis. We'd love to talk about that.
There was a big follow-up or,
something big
said,
happened.
Oh, hey, look at this. Maybe something will happen, and then something huge did happen.
Yep.
Or whatever. Just the highlights of 2013.
You can submit those ideas by emailing us, by clicking that contact link and choosing TechSNAP from the dropdown. Or I've started a thread in the TechSNAP subreddit. I will add this to the show notes. You can click that, and if you just add your thoughts to that thread, you don't even have to be specific. The more specific you are, the more it helps us out, obviously. Like if you even have
it would be great if you had the episode number and the timestamps for the start and stop of us talking about it.
Especially because if it's
show, but
I could go get a clip from it, right? Like if you give me that kind of info, I'll go get a clip and we'll play it on the show. But if you don't, even if you just kind of vaguely remember the details or who was involved, we'll still take that too, and we'll focus in on that when we record on the 18th for release on the 26th. So we'll link to that in the show notes. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but you can also email us. Just click that contact link, top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. All right, Alan. Well, the first one, is this a real thing?
I think it was a real thing.
8.1 on 3.5-inch floppy drives? Disc?
Yeah, so this is 8.1 on your regular 3.5-inch floppy drive.
Which required how many?
3,711 discs. And it's got the right logo and type font. It includes Windows Internet Explorer 11, and the discs are labeled in Japanese. And they got the right copyright date. I don't think this is a Photoshop.
Do you think this is really happening?
Well, I'm sure if you're a big enough customer and you can explain to Microsoft why you need it on floppies, they will, it only costs, if you're going to pay for it, why wouldn't they?
I guess so, right? The last time I loaded Windows from a floppy, it was Windows 95, like OS.
And that was like 35 floppies. That was a big deal then.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was pretty proud of myself because I'd figured out how to use a RAM disk to accelerate the loading of the operating system, but it still all came down to the house low.
I remember for Windows 2000, we did something like that at the power plant. What it would do is we had like a basic DOS boot CD.
Yeah.
That would then, on the CD, there was a giant .zip. So instead of seeking around and reading different files off the CD to install Windows, it would extract this zip, which was just one solid chunk. So the CD-ROM, instead of seeking around, it would just ramp up to max speed, which was loud in these older.
Yes.
These were. Yes. It was just tearing the data off the CD and throwing it on the hard drive as fast as possible.
Yep. So I remember my ultimate was and this is how good this is how you know you made something good when the IT department uses it for years after you leave. It's a boot disk. It was called Toe Fisher's Ultimate Boot Disk 2000 because it was the year 2000. You put it in the drive, and you had to have, so before you power on the machine, make sure you have your parallel port zip drive loaded with all the Windows 95 cab files on the zip disk.
Yep.
You put that in the drive, you'd boot from Toe Fisher's Boot Disk 2000, it would boot up and automatically load like Super Drive, I can't remember what the RAM caching thing was called, and start the Windows installer with an answer file and automatically install it all. And I was so clever because I had copied all of the files from the floppy disk to one 100 megabyte zip drive.
Yep.
Well, speaking of old times, when I like to reflect on the good old days, one of the hackers from OL is Kevin Mitnick. And he had a video, I think it's part of an overall piece that Big Think is pushing, called How to Troll the FBI. I don't want to get us pulled off YouTube.
When the government was chasing me.
But I thought I'd play a couple of minutes of it because, when he starts with a sentence like that, kind of sounds compelling.
I wanted to get a sense of how close they were. And to me, this was a game. It was kind of like I was a little bit insane, and I treated my fugitive status as like a big video game. Unfortunately, it had real consequences. And why I did this psychologically is I love putting myself in dangerous situations and then trying to work my way out of them. Now, I don't know why I like doing this, but I did. So what I did is I hacked into the cellular provider in Los Angeles that serviced the FBI cell phones numbers of the agents that were chasing me. So to make a long story short, I was able to get the cell phone numbers of the agents, and then by hacking into the cellular provider, I could monitor where they physically were, physically in Los Angeles. I could also monitor who they were calling and who was calling them. So based on my traffic analysis and my location data, I was able to find out if the feds ever got close. And in one time, they did. I had an early warning system set up in 1992 when I was working as a private investigator in Los Angeles. And when the warning system was tripped off, I found out that the FBI was actually at my apartment, and I was a mile away in Calabasas. But I just drove in from the apartment to work. So obviously they weren't there to arrest me, and I didn't think if they were still near my apartment that it was to surveil me. So the only logical thing is that they were there to conduct a search, and that means to get a search warrant. They didn't have a search warrant yet. So in every criminal case, when they have to get a search warrant from a judge, they have to write down the precise description of the premises to be searched. It's the Fourth Amendment stuff. And so I figured out that was going on. And so the very next day, I cleaned up, that evening I cleaned up everything from my apartment that the FBI may be interested in. And then the very next day, I went out to Winchell's Donuts and got a big dozen assorted donuts, and I labeled the box FBI Donuts, and I put it in the refrigerator. So when they were going to come search, the only thing they would find is I had some donuts for them. They searched the next day. They didn't find anything. I don't even know if they opened the refrigerator, but if they did, they didn't help themselves to a donut for some reason. I don't know why.
a little pro tip, Alan.
Yes.
You don't want to do that today.
Awesome story.
That is a great story. And so we'll have it linked in the show notes. I think it's overall part of a larger interview with Kevin Mitnick.
Donnie Mouse asks, the Fourth Amendment still exists? It did in 1992.
Yeah, that was the early 90s, right? A more innocent time. All right, our next story on the roundup, FBI warns...
Speaking of hacking the FBI.
Yeah, right, exactly. Warns of hacking spree on government agencies is a widespread problem. Shocker, Alan.
Yes, there are two different stories. This one is... The first one from Ars Technica involves someone from the UK actually being arrested. And then there's also a second story from Reuters. There are a list of different agencies, including the U.S. Army, the Department of Energy, the Department of Health and Human Services, all got hacked using Cold Fusion, which is the Adobe product that got Adobe and all that hack that happened against Adobe, the one we were just talking about. All those sites ran Cold Fusion. Now, Adobe says that, these are all, it was using, exploits that they've already issued fixes for, and the people were using old versions of Cold Fusion. It was their fault. And they don't seem to make the connection that Adobe apparently was running an old version of their own app as well. Then, how do they explain Adobe getting hacked?
Exactly. Very good question. It shows you how enterprises struggle with this kind of thing. All right. Well, next question. You might not be an enterprise, but if you have a large user base, you still have this issue. GitHub resets user passwords following a rash of account hijackings. Now, what's different about this, it's not necessarily a leak. GitHub is just experiencing an increase in user account hijackings that is being fueled by a rash of automated login attempts from as many as 40,000 unique IP addresses. So GitHub is kind of giving folks a warning, and on their security history page, they log important events. So if you think maybe your account was targeted, you can go over to your GitHub security history page. The advisory also has suggested from GitHub that new users review their account and ensure they're using a strong password. And by the way, GitHub would like to remind all of you they do support two-factor authentication.
Yeah, so it sounds like some users had weak passwords, and somebody hired a botnet for a couple of dollars,
which we covered last
week, using it. Was using it to brute force certain accounts, and so GitHub, detected if your account was accessed by a lot of different IP addresses and just automatically reset your password just in case.
GitHub.
Because my password at GitHub did not get reset. So.
Yeah, and neither did mine. But GitHub is becoming such a target. So go make sure you have a unique password at GitHub.
Well, if you could take over certain accounts on GitHub, you could slip a backdoor into open source software. And, people would probably be able to find it. But how many people would download it and use the bad code and not notice that it was...
Right, even if you found it within a day or two.
Yeah, how many people would have already downloaded it, and how many people... there's a decent chance some embedded hardware vendor is going to grab the code on a certain day and use it, and you'll never know that they were using it, and they'll never bother checking for updates. And now that exploit is in some piece of hardware.
Yeah, good point. All right, well, what the hell?
If you're interested in how some of that stuff works, especially with old code existing forever, the BSD Now interview with Paul Hennenkamp from 6 weeks ago now, I think, talked about when he wrote the MD5 crypt function, and that's built into every Cisco router for 15 years, and
a lot of
all
other things
kinds of devices.
Yeah,
and a lot of times he wasn't even aware that people were using it,
right?
Because the license didn't require that,
right?
And they've never fixed it, and so he deprecated it, hoping that some people will replace it, but there's probably a lot of people still using it, and that won't stop.
And that came up during your conversation with him in the interview? That's interesting, Alan.
Yes, we talked about that in the interview.
All right, so what the hell are flame graphs? Because our next roundup is blazing performance with flame graphs.
It's kind of flame graph that I think Brendan Gregg invented. It's basically using dtrace to visualize data and figuring out what's making your program slow.
God, dtrace is so awesome. So this is sort of graphing out. Oh yeah, it totally is. This is graphing out where the slowdown is happening, what's causing it, and what spot it's spending the most time on. Like in this case,
they're basically a kind of heat map.
Yeah, a heat map, exactly. It's a heat map. It's a total heat map of.
That's where the flame thing comes from.
I like it. Okay, I get it. This is really cool. And Alan's linked us a video. Let's see. I'll play a little bit.
Yep, this is a video from the Usenik Lisa conference
of where I'm actually spending my time. So even though it's multiple threads, fine to cram it together at once. And the same goes for a distributed system. I may be running MySQL or Node.js or whatever it is across 100 nodes, and then I'm able to do one flame graph that shows the CPU usage across all of those nodes.
Yeah, and the way he's got this graph labeled out is like each part of the flame is sort of been identified as the process. It is pretty awesome, actually. A flame graph. I like this.
Yep.
This is pretty nice. The whole video presentation, it's also available in audio for you TechSNAP fans who are audio connoisseurs and prefer to listen to your content that way. They've got it available as both.
But this one's about graphs, so you might want to look at the video just to see what he's talking about, because they're really, really cool graphs.
Yeah, I think so. All right, Alan. Well,
I think his slides are on the website somewhere as well, or will be soon.
This one's posted over on Slashdot. Warning to SC13. Supercomputing will plateau without a disruptive technology to replace it.
Yes, so going on right this minute in Denver, Colorado is Supercomputing 2013, the conference. And one of their keynotes was about how unless somebody comes up with a new disruptive technology, supercomputing isn't going to get much better for a while.
We've hit the peak.
Well, yeah, we got machines with 24 or 32 cores, and we got lots of RAM, and the clock speeds aren't going up much, and the processor core counts aren't going up much. So the supercomputing is going to kind of just sit there until somebody invents something new.
No, our next story in the roundup. Where did this come from? It's a shirt.
This is just from Twitter.
My SaaS vendor told me this is a bulletproof vest, and it's a T-shirt.
Yeah. Because, your SaaS vendor will tell you anything to get you to sign up with them.
Software as a service, folks. Amen. If that isn't the lesson, like a little bit of nugget of insight to take away from this episode, the SaaS vendor will literally tell you a T-shirt is a bulletproof vest to get you to buy. How
it reminds me of the one we did the other day about big data.
Right.
Remember that one?
It's so true, Alan. It's so true. All right, last link, fun with .bashrc. Now, this is some good, wholesome fun.
Not really, no.
No, now I'm looking at it. So the first line is echo-n passwords, read-s passwords, echo password, and then it has a util file here. Mail. Yeah, right there on the machine.
So basically what happens is when you log in, the bashrc script pops up, so the first thing you see is actually a password prompt.
Yep.
Not a real password prompt. But
I need to re-enter my password. Let me see here.
Yeah, especially say you log in with SSH keys.
Yeah.
And if it pops up a password box, you're probably like, oh, maybe my SSH key isn't set up on this machine or whatever.
Totally
So
normal.
you type in your password. And what it does is email that password back to the person who edited your .bashrc file.
Literally the third line in this .bashrc file.
The subject of the email address is password for username at hostname.
Yep.
And then it does some cleanup. So tail will then delete. It'll basically overwrite the bashrc file with all of the what was in the bashrc file, except for these couple of lines.
I feel like
so you insert this at the top of the bashrc file.
Yep.
It steals your password.
Yep.
Then it erases the evidence of this from the bashrc file.
Yep.
So that the next time, or even after the login, so you get that password prompt, you enter it, you get into the box, and then you look to see what was happening, all the evidence is gone now.
No, what I think is particularly genius about this is at the end, after it's captured your password, it sent it off to somebody. It then, at the end of all of it, after it deletes the record that you've even done this, it then just cats the message of the day file and just pretend like everything's normal. Like, oh, you've successfully entered the password.
You don't see it, but it creates the file .hush login so that it doesn't print the message of the day when you log in. And then the script plays the module manually and erases the hush file so that the next time when you log in, you get the module as you expect.
Yep. So smart. And you know what? What's a little dangerous about this particular roundup story, the audience can literally just go copy and paste this and go have some fun.
Right. All you have to do is find someone who left their SSH session logged in, so you're logged in as them and can edit the file.
Yep. It's ready to go.
Yep. I remember doing things like this to people at school. One of the cool ones was we all got access via VPN to this NetBSD server for our NetBSD security class. And the teacher had just set the password for everybody's username was a student number, and the password was the same for every user. Mm-hmm. And then when you logged in the first time, you would change it.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Very common.
Well, I got the email first, so I just logged in as this guy we didn't like named Kevin. And I I changed his password, then I decided, no, what I'll do instead is put his password back, and I'll edit his .login file, or his bash RC, to cat dev random.
Yes.
Because this is BSD, so dev random is infinite, unlike on Linux where you'd have to use dev urandom. So instead of him being locked out when he logs in, and then he would just get the teacher to reset the password, when he logged in, he would just get spam. If he was smart enough to hit Control-C, he would get a shell.
Yeah.
But he wasn't.
No, so. And he's panicking like, oh my God, what's going on here, right?
Like, what is this?
Yeah.
How do I make it stop?
Oh, man. That's way better than any trolling I ever did, Alan. That's pretty clever. That's good. And you combine this, we'll have it linked in the show notes. I mean, I'm not saying the TechSNAP program ever recommends that you prank your coworkers, ever. But if you wanted to set a cron job that automatically emailed them something, or you wanted to set up a bash script when they logged in to sort of prank them a little bit so that way you could log in as them and then screw things, well, this would be the one to do. So we'll have that linked in the roundup section of the show. All right, Alan, I think that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, don't forget, we want your best ofs for things that either went big or went bust. We'll have a thread already started over at links.techsnap.tv, but also, maybe you're not the Redditing type. That's okay. We totally understand. Just send it in to us. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and pop that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, and then choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. Boom! They'll send it to our inbox automatically, and our well-trained monkeys will process your email and tag it accordingly.
Well-trained monkeys.
And by well-trained monkeys, I mean us. Yeah. All right, Alan. Well, a good 2 shows back-to-back. Boom! You. Right there, all done. Thank you very much. And don't forget, if you'd like to join us next week live, you can. Head over to jblive.tv on a Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
Kaboom! And don't forget, you can also join us live at jblive.info if you just got the audio only. Maybe you're at your desk. Maybe you're in your car. Maybe you're in a non-flash situation. We understand. You go to jblive.info. We got 2 different feeds, one for your desk and one for your mobile, and they'll take care of you. You can also grab BitTorrent versions of this show, and you can also subscribe to us via RSS and get the show automatically every single week. TechSNAP is live on Thursdays, which means every Thursday evening Pacific time, you get a new show. Why wouldn't you want to subscribe to that? All right, Alan. Well, have a great couple of weeks. We'll see you back here soon, okay? All right. Okay. Bye, Alan. Bye. Wait. There we go. Bye, Alan. Bye. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.